Hi, this lecture will cover the scale degrees. Identifying the pitch in the scale is very important, but it can be tasking to say, for example, play the pitch G in the C major scale, or play the fourth pitch descending the C major scale. By using scale degrees, you can eliminate this word scramble. Whether you're using the major or minor scale degrees work on both. Ascending either of those scales, the starting pitch is identified as the first degree of the scale. The second pitch is identified as the second degree, and so on. For clarity, let's look at the C major scale. Ascending the scale, the first pitch in the scale is C, so that would be the first degree. Second pitch would be D, and that's the second degree. E is the third degree, F is the fourth degree, G is the fifth degree, A is the sixth degree, B is the seventh degree. And you get C again. That could be 8th degree or 1st degree depending on the situation and what's easier for you to notate. And each of those degrees have a name. The first degree of the scale is called the tonic, which is the modern equivalent of the ancient model final. The scale is named after the pitch that is the tonic. So for A major, the tonic is A, and for D minor, the tonic is D. The equivalent of the modern recitation tone is called a dominant. The dominant is the fifth degree of the scale and is a perfect fifth above the tonic. For example, the dominant for A major is E, and the dominant for D minor is A. Going a perfect fifth below the tonic, you get the subdominant, which is the fourth degree of the scale. For example, the subdominant of the A major scale is D, and the subdominant of the D major scale is G. Those are the most important degrees to keep notice of, because both the major and the minor scale shares them, and they're stable intervals. In the middle between the tonic and the dominant, you got the third degree, and this degree is called the mediant. The mediant of the A major scale is C sharp, and the mediant of the D minor scale is F. Of course, the median determines if the scale is a major or a minor. In the middle between the tonic and the subdominant, below it you got the sixth degree, and it's called a submediant. The submediant in the A major scale is F sharp, and the submediant in the D minor scale is A sharp, and the submediant determines the quality of the minor scale. The second degree of the scale is called a supertonic. Also, both the major and minor scale have it, although it's not as stable as the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth. The supertonic of the A major scale is B, and the supertonic of the D minor scale is E. The last scale degree, the seventh one, is called leading tone. The name comes from the effect it creates when ascending the major scale. For example, if you stop at the 7th degree, it sounds incomplete or unfinished, like it's shouting to go back to the tonic. And this same effect exists in the harmonic and melodic minor scales. But the leading tone must be a semitone below the tonic. So in the case of the natural minor, where the 7th degree is a whole tone away, it would be called a subtonic. So the leading tone of the A major scale is G sharp, and the subtonic of the D minor scale is C. Here is the list of all the degrees and their names. Because some scale degrees are identical to both the major and minor scale, some of them serves a more important purpose in writing music than others. For example, the tonic, the subdominant, and the dominant degrees are identical in the parallel major and minor scale. So if the music is performed using only those degrees without any other degree, it would be impossible to know if the song is written in the major or minor scale. For this reason, the tonic, subdominant, and dominant pitches have often been identified as being tonal scale degrees. Those pitches that clearly establish in the listener's ear the tonic or tonal center of the music. In contrast, the median, submediant, and the leading tone are scale degrees that differ in the major modality from the minor modality, and are therefore the pitches that enable the listener to identify the modality of the music. For this reason, these pitches have been identified as modal scale degrees. The supertonic can be either, because it exists in both the major and minor scale. Melodic tendencies is something to keep notice of, because while you can go back and forth in pitches and it might sound okay, or even good, but not everything works, and some degrees work better than others. For example, as I mentioned earlier, if you play an ascending major scale and stop on the leading tone, it becomes clear that the scale feels incomplete. The need for the resolution is satisfied only by finishing the scale on the tonic. Here's an example. Similarly, other scale degrees also imply movement towards another pitch. To illustrate this, try the reverse. Play a descending scale and stop on the supertonic. You'll feel a desire to complete the descent to the tonic. Here's an example. When playing a melody that is clearly in a specific key, ending on the dominant creates a sense of incompleteness. However, resolving to the tonic, whether by leaping up or down or by moving to the upper or lower tonic from the dominant, tends to satisfy most listeners. Here's an example. Other tendencies are subtler and less universally recognized. For instance, in a major key, ending a melodic line on the subdominant after clearly establishing the tonality often creates a sense of discomfort that can be temporarily eased by moving down to the median. Here's an example. The tendency of the submediant in both major and natural minor scales, and also the descending melodic minor, is often to move towards the dominant. In major and ascending melodic minor, the submediant generally aims to resolve to the tonic through the leading tone, but it can also feel ambiguous and somewhat without direction. In major keys, the mediant often provides a sense of stability, second only to the tonic. In minor keys, however, the mediant feels somewhat less stable compared to its major counterpart. If it has any tendency at all, it would be to descend to the tonic through the supertonic, or perhaps to be replaced by the major mediant. Here's an example. It's also very important to think of writing melody the same way you think of writing a poem, or even just speaking a casual conversation. Writing the melody using certain scales and certain degrees and certain durations gives a special feeling to the listener that using in other ways would give the listener a different feeling, or not a strong feeling. That's what we know as tonal goals. A melody isn't just a series of pitches, it's a sequence of notes that guides the listener's ear towards a different tonal center. Depending on the style and complexity of the melody, the relationships among these tonal goals can be straightforward and clear, or more intricate and obscure. Every melody has some kind of structure at the very least. It has a beginning and an end. Between these key points, there may be one or more temporary stops or goals that eventually lead to the final destination. However, the discussion about tendencies of the scale degrees that we went through earlier shouldn't be seen as strict rules for composing melodies. Great melodies don't always follow predictable paths, and they often succeed precisely because they surprise us. One more thing I'd like to talk about, and is used a lot, is the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale is basically going up or down using only semitones. It's used to get from one point to the other using a smooth road with semitones. When writing with the chromatic scale, it's practiced to use sharps when ascending and flats when descending. Keep in mind the key signature though. These changes are made according to them. The next part of this course will focus on harmony in music. Hopefully you enjoyed this part of the course. Exercises are available as well. See you in the next part of this course.